All right, there we go. Welcome everyone to tonight's session. Tonight's session is on time management and productivity. Just so all of you know, I will be recording the session as well, and it is being streamed live on Facebook, so do be mindful. In the meantime, while I'm going through the intros, like I mentioned, feel free to put your intro into the chat. You can also share your LinkedIn profile if you'd like people to connect with you. I see some people are already sharing, that's great. So why don't I get right into it? So today we will go through some brief intros at the start. I'll jump right into the presentation. There will be time during the presentation for Q&A. I will be doing some exercises with all of you as well. But if you have any questions, feel free to jump in at any time. There will be some time at the very end as well for more questions. So I like to have this more as a conversation rather than as a presentation. So feel free to jump in at any time. Share your insights if you find that you have things that work for you as well. So like I mentioned, I don't like to see myself as the expert. I believe that there is no such thing as one size fits all. Everyone has a different style that works best for them. So if you have other tips and tricks, other methods that you find work for you, do share. We'd love to hear from that. And with the workshops that I run, I do try to create a welcoming and inclusive environment. So please, if you hear anyone coming off mute, if English is not your first language, be bear with them a bit. Let's make sure that we are respectful here and we are welcoming to everyone. So quickly, I just need to do a quick donation for each of my workshops. Most of them are free, and I do make it donation-based. So what the donation does is 50% of the donation goes towards Universal Outreach Foundation. So the last workshop I did was about 2 weeks ago, and that was the one on real estate. So we had $5, someone paid for that. So I pay half of it towards Universal Outreach Foundation. And what that is it's basically an organization that provides education support for people in developing countries. They're doing a lot of work right now in Liberia. All right, and then that is now done. Let's confirm that. So how I like to kick off my sessions is community announcements. So if you have anything that you want to share, this is your time, 30 seconds to share any events that you have coming up. If you're looking for a job, if you're looking to hire someone, if you have other workshops of your own, basically anything that you want to share, feel free to come off mute. This is the time for you to take the floor and share what you're working on with everyone else. If you are uncomfortable coming off mute, you can also type your announcement in the chat and I will read it out.
Yeah, hey everyone.
Hey Paul.
It's nice to be back. I'm just gonna say I'm really grateful for, I guess, the webinar we had, what was it, 1 or 2 weeks ago, around mortgages for self-employed people, and just some updates for those looking at homes, whether it's refinancing or eventually affording something. Mortgage rates are below 2% with certain lenders. So that was pretty exciting to kind of see that and see how people are, I guess, taking in the news. So obviously it's something that I do, but yeah, I'm stoked on the webinar we did. And we had a lot of people follow up after that who felt a lot more comfortable with actually exploring home buying, which I think is really cool.
Amazing.
So thanks for putting that on.
Not a problem. Anyone else? Any announcements you want to share? Anything is fair game. The only thing that I don't like hearing is sales pitches. All right, if no one has an announcement, I have a quick one to make as well. I'm in the process of setting up a new program, so it's something brand new. I'm still in the works of working out all of the details for it. But basically, I'm launching a new startup sales academy. This is for, it's basically for entrepreneurs that have no sales or business background, and they're looking to start a business, but they don't really know how to negotiate, how to prospect and find leads. It's more for B2B type of businesses. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can send me an email. And my email is actually up here. It's Chin, C-H-I-N, @classynarwhal.com. And I will put it in the chat as well. Anyone else? Any announcements? Great. If no announcements, we will move on. So quickly, just to introduce you to me and who I am. So my name is Chin. I'm your host tonight. And I come from a background in both entrepreneurship, but also in sales. I spent the last 5 years working for a social venture incubator accelerator known as Spring. What we did over there was we supported early entrepreneurs who were launching businesses that were what we call social ventures, so do good businesses. These are businesses that make the world a better place in some way, not only through profit, but they're also helping the planet, helping the community, things like that as well. So in those 5 years, I've probably worked with over 500 companies and different entrepreneurs. So I think a lot of the lessons that I've learned come from learning from other people, learning from great mentors, learning from how all of the other companies are working as well. So I'd like to be able to share different tips and tricks that I've learned. Hopefully they'll be able to give you some good insights on how you can both improve, manage your life, and also become a bit more productive with how you get by day to day. So the company that I run right now is called Classy Novel. Classy Novel is focused around soft skill training and development. So topics like this, time management, productivity. We have other topics like, we have a few coming up around eating well, diets. We have one on life insurance. We have a few coming up on sales related topics. So topics are quite varied, but all of them are generally topics that are what I call life or essential skills. So key outcomes, key things that I will cover today. And actually, maybe before I jump into that, I'll do a quick magic trick. So what I'll do is I'll stop my screen share. I've been testing this out with a few different webinars, and I have a new trick I want to try with all of you today. So first off, turn on your video if you want to. I love to be able to see you along with me in this trick. And I will actually turn off my background so you can see it a bit more clearly as well. There we go. So I encourage you all to participate as well and try out this magic trick if you can. If you want to make sure that I'm not hiding anything shady, you can turn on speaker view for me, and that makes me just a little bit bigger. All right, I'll give you all a few minutes to do that. Feel free to turn on your video and put me on speaker view if you want to have me front and center. I love this trick. I tried this with my wife last week, and it really flipped her out. So I will actually do the trick a few times, and we'll see if any of you can actually do it. So do turn on your video. I'd love to see if any of you can actually follow along and actually do what I'm hoping to get you to do. Great. Looks like everyone is very shy today. That's fine. So do follow along even if you don't have your video on. So the first thing I want you to do is put your hand up like this, like in an OK sign. And what I want you to do is see if you can follow along with me and flip it. So 1, 2, 3, flip. I see Paul's trying to do it.
No, I can't.
Well, I'll show again, and I'll do it a bit more slowly now to see if you can follow along. And if you still don't get the trick, I will actually show at the very end how I do it. Don't worry, there's no acrobatics. I don't have any really flexible fingers or anything like that. So, okay. And I flip.
Okay, now.
Is anyone able to do it now or still struggling to do it? Great. Well, I will share the secret at the end, so no worries. Anyway, so let's get back to the presentation. So key outcomes for today, we will cover talking a bit about how to multiply your time using a focus funnel. I'll touch on the Pomodoro technique for those of you who are not familiar with it. We'll talk about Pareto principle as well, and then we'll go into flow state and routine. So some of these principles might be familiar to some of you, but I'll go into a bit more detail on how to use it and when to use it as well. So the first thing I want all of you to do is a quick exercise. So quick exercise, I want all of you to pull out your to-do list. It could be a list that you have on pen and paper. It could be a list that you have on, let's say, Trello or Asana or maybe Google Keep. Wherever you keep this list, pull it out. And what I want you to do is I want you to review your list and try to scratch 3 things off your list. And then the next thing I want you to do is I want you to look at your calendar and all meetings that you have scheduled a month in advance, try to see if you can cancel all of them if possible. So I'll give you all a few minutes to do that. I'm just gonna put myself on mute. Yes, I will definitely explain why in a second. And just to repeat, basically pull out your to-do list, review and see if you can take 3 items off your list. And then the next one is to see if you can remove or cancel all of the appointments that you have scheduled a month out in advance. Don't worry if you can't remove all of the appointments. If there are important meetings, then definitely keep them. But if you feel like some of the meetings were meetings that you took by accident or just because you found it hard to say no, then this is kind of the opportunity to see if you can remove them. You don't actually have to remove them right now, but you can also just mark them down for removal when you have the time. Great. So I think what we'll do is I will move on. So the quick explanation over here is we tend to actually find it most of the time difficult to say no to a lot of things. So we tend to overcommit to many things. The idea of this exercise is just to quickly review all of our items, just to see if whatever we've committed to doing is actually something that we need to do or something that is more optional. And then with the calendars and meetings, same thing as well. There are definitely some things that are still important. Keep them on your calendar if you really need to. And then I'll go through the criteria piece in a bit as well. So throughout the presentation, we'll talk about how to evaluate some of the tasks. And we will talk about how to prioritize all of the things that you have as well. So I'm just going to stop my screen share. And yeah, feel free to put me back on speaker view so you have me front and center. I will be sharing my screen at different points of the presentation to show you some different concepts. Great, let's move on. So the key thing that I want to share today is this framework and principle that was actually shared by Rory Baden in his TED Talk, How to Multiply Your Time. So you can look up the TED Talk on YouTube if you have the time. But the key principle is he starts by talking a bit about, if you look at today, the day and age right now, technology has changed so much. It has made so many things possible. You have, cell phones in your hands. It's pretty much like having a computer in your hand. Back in the days, everything in communication used to be through snail mail. You'd send a letter, it would take maybe 2 weeks to get to someone. Now you can send instant messages, emails are instant, text. Everything is happening so much more quickly. You can do calculations a lot more quickly as well. So with all of the advancements that we have, why is it that we still don't have enough time, right? We still find that we are constantly consumed. We are still rushing to meet deadlines, really struggling to get things done. A lot of it really happens because if you reflect on time management, all of us are given an equal opportunity. We all have the same amount of time, right? But the thing is, when you think about time management, everything you know about time management in itself is a little bit inaccurate, because time management is not possible. You can't really manage time. Time management isn't just logical. A lot of time management is actually really emotional. A lot of time management is about managing yourself and giving you the permission to do things that you want, and giving you the permission to do things that you don't want, that are not priority. So it's mostly about managing yourself rather than managing time. We will go through today some concepts around how to manage yourself, how to give yourself permission to really spend time on the things that you want, like family, like on your business, on your personal health, things like that. And we'll talk about how to really evaluate and make sure that you're still making time for all of your other commitments as well. So to give you a brief history on how a lot of these things came to be, how time management principles came to be, let's quickly talk about the first principle of time management. The first principle of time management is based on one-dimensional thinking. The assumption here is the more efficient you are at doing something, the more quickly you get something done, the more productive you are, right? But as you've seen, as I mentioned, even though we all have literal computers in our hands, nothing much has really changed in that sense. So getting things done more quickly, yes, it does make you a little bit more productive. You can fit more things in your day. The second framework then is two-dimensional thinking. So you're not just thinking about getting things done more quickly, but you're also thinking about getting the right things done in the right order. So this is more about, if you've heard of the term, there's this one called Eisenhower Matrix. It's talked about in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And what it does is it allows you to grade and score all of the tasks on your to-do list based on what is urgent versus what is important as well. So I'll quickly share my screen so you can see what the matrix looks like. There we go. So this is the Eisenhower matrix, and what it does is every item that you have will usually fall into one of the quadrants. So important, not important, urgent, or non-urgent. So important could be something that is critical, like a meeting. It could be a project, but it could also be important and non-urgent, right? So it could be important and urgent, something you need to do right now. It could be important, like setting strategy for your business, planning, goal setting, building relationships. All these things are really important, but they're not that urgent. So they don't usually have a deadline. Or they could be non-important, but urgent. So like, phone calls that you have coming up, events that you have coming, or they could be just absolutely not important and not non-urgent. So these are what we call distractions. So that's like, browsing on social media, binge watching on Netflix, things like that. So the idea is everything that you have, all of the tasks that you have coming in, what you want to do is you want to look at the tasks that you have and see which quadrant it falls into. And this will help you prioritize. So the ideal situation is, of course, whatever is important and urgent is something that you need to do right now. Whatever is in quadrant number 2, which is important and non-urgent, are things that you need to start planning for. And then non-important but urgent are things that you want to try to delegate if at all possible. And then quadrant of distraction, that's where you want to eliminate them as much as possible. So these are the ways or the criteria against to evaluate the different tasks that you have that someone was asking about. So I'm going to move on from this slide, but feel free to refer back to it. And I will send the slides to everyone who's attending the presentation as well. So don't worry if you don't catch anything. So the challenge then now is we've looked at the existing frameworks around time management. And what we see is the first framework talks about doing things more quickly, being more efficient. The second framework talks about prioritizing and kind of making sure that we have the right things in the right order. But if you put them two together, you start to feel like most of us, if you look at words that we use to describe our days, how we kind of describe the tasks that we have and how we're overwhelmed, the first framework talks about efficiency. And we always talk about how we feel like we're on a hamster wheel and we're just spinning our gears and we're just doing as many things as we can. And then prioritization, a lot of people, there's this analogy that they use where they say they feel like they're juggling too many things, right? And I think that's exactly what we are going through. We are kind of like hamsters juggling on a wheel. So the idea is there is something that is actually missing. And what's actually missing in this dynamics is there's actually a third dimension that we're not considering. And the third dimension is the dimension of significance. So yes, important, urgent, but also what is actually significant? How long will something that you do matter? Will it last to the future, or is it something that's only important right now in this current moment? So if you think about some of these things, then what you're looking for is, let's say, something simple like setting up your bill payment, for example. Setting up automatic bill payment might take you maybe, let's say for gross overestimations, just to give you a clear example, let's say it takes you an hour to set up automatic bill payment. But every month, if you don't set up automatic bill payment, it takes you 20 minutes to manually process the billing. So sometimes people feel like, I don't have that hour, I'll put it off. It only takes me 20 minutes to set it up. But if you actually automate the bill payment and you set it up for an hour, if you think about it, over 4 months, basically you have recaptured that hour that you spent setting up the bill payment, and all future months coming after that, you're actually multiplying the time. All of that is extra time that you have back in your hands, right? So the idea is a good multiplier is someone who is thinking about tasks that are coming in, and they're thinking about how can I also make sure that whatever I'm doing is something that is significant, that will last as far into the future as possible. A big common one I see with a lot of entrepreneurs is the challenge around hiring and delegation. A lot of people feel like, oh, if I hire someone, I need to train them. It's going to take me a lot of time. I don't have the time to bring about someone onboarding, give them all the right materials, make sure that they're good. I feel like I'm already good at this task. I'll just do it right away. But that's because they're not considering significance. If they're considering significance, then they're actually looking into the future and they're thinking, eventually this person will become as good, if not better than me at doing this task. So the goal is to take that sort of significance factor into consideration so that when you start to plan your items, you're making sure that whatever you're doing actually lasts as long as possible. So your goal is you want to try to find room and give yourself emotional permission to do things today that will help you create more time tomorrow or in the future. Make sense? So now if we think about it in this way, then the framework shifts. The framework is more about attention management. It's not so much about time management. Sorry, did someone want to say something? JMA, Jima, did you want to say something? That's fine. I think you probably accidentally came out mute. So yeah, like I mentioned, because it's not so much about managing time now, it's more about managing attention. Your goal then is you want to be able to focus on attention as your currency. So time is not your currency. It's more about the attention that you have and what you spend your time on. So with the right task and with the right attention, then you're in a situation where you really have focus. So Rory Baden introduces this concept known as the focus funnel. So I'll quickly share my screen so you can see what that looks like. The focus funnel is a framework where every item that you have coming in, every task that you have, the first thing that you try to do is you try to eliminate it. So if you can say no, the first default option is not to say yes, it's to say no. Most of us, our default is to say yes. So the flip side is now everything that you evaluate is, do I need to do it? If you need to do it, then it is important, right? Because what you're seeing is, like I mentioned, whether or not it's important or non-important. So if it's important, okay, do you automate it? So is it possible for you to actually find a way digitally, virtually using technology to automate it? If not, then there are other ways where you can use processes to automate things as well. So for example, using your calendar and actually making sure that for each meeting that you have coming up, that you have all of the necessary items prepared in advance so that you don't have to go and pull it all together every time. So whatever you can automate now, you try to do it so that in the future, you don't have to waste time. And then delegation. So if you can't automate it, then can you actually delegate it to someone else? So you get someone else to do it for you. And if you really can't delegate it, then the option then is, if you have to do it, do you need it done now or does it need to be done later? So if you need to do it now, then what you're doing is you're concentrating, you're focusing on getting something done. If it's something that you can finish later at a later time, then this is a concept known as procrastination on purpose. And it's actually a very valid principle that I've seen apply quite usefully to many situations. So as an example, when I write content, so a lot of the blog posts that I create, some of the videos that I do, some of the workshops that I run, I deliberately procrastinate on purpose because I find that the more I procrastinate, I learn some new concepts. And then what I can do is I can introduce some of those new concepts into whatever content that I'm producing, versus if I just try to do it right away. So there is a fine balance between when you should start doing things and when you can put things off. But the idea is, if it doesn't need to be done right now, then you're waiting for a more opportune time because many other factors can align better at another specific time to actually get something done. Make sense? So what you want to try to do is just try to use the focus funnel if you can to look at the tasks that you have. What can you eliminate? What can you automate? And what can you delegate? So maybe now that you have that framework, why don't we go through that same exercise again? And I want you to review your to-do list again and see some of the items based on the criteria that you have. What can you now eliminate, automate, delegate? What needs to be done now versus later? And see if you can reshuffle your list a bit. As you're thinking about some of these pieces around automation and delegation, you're also thinking about that significance factor that I talked about. What can you automate that will help you save time? What can you delegate so that you don't have to do it? And see, if possible, if you can actually remove 3 more items. Or if you couldn't remove any before, maybe now you might be able to. Right, so I'll give you all 2 minutes to do this. All right, thanks for going through the exercise. Andrea has a comment. Feel free to come off mute if you'd like to. Or you can type your comment out as well. When I was at college studying and doing lots of activities before COVID-19, it was much more easy to manage my attention and time. That's an interesting comment. Do you think what has changed since then is mostly related to the environment that you're in? Is it because there are more distractions now, or is it mostly because I mentioned before, time management is mostly emotional? Is it also because of the emotional aspect of it, where you feel like you might be a bit depressed, or maybe there's a lack of direction, maybe the change has caused you to be in an area of uncertainty and you feel like you don't really know what to do? Chores, one of the things for sure. My question there around chores then is, when you think about chores, whether or not you were in college, some of those chores were probably things that you still had to do, unless you're talking about chores where maybe in college you were living in a dorm, you didn't have to look after your parents, and now you're at home, now you have to look after your parents, your grandparents, and things like that as well. So maybe that has changed. Is that one of the things that you're talking about? Family at home, emotional aspects, anxiety. Oh, kid at home, definitely. Yes, I do have a child at home as well. So that has definitely changed how we work as well. So some of these things are things that we can't control, what we have on our plates. For example, before COVID, I was sending my kid to the daycare, so I definitely had a lot more time. And then when the situation changed and daycares closed down, then I had to look after the kid. But the idea is you want to be able to control what you can control versus think about things that you can't control, right? So don't let all of the things that you can't control overwhelm you. Focus on what you can control and see how you can maximize time there.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, Chin, it's Paul again. This is really important stuff, and I definitely resonate with Andrea. And also, I mean, this may be covered later on, and please let me know. But I mean, getting grounded into like our to-do list, I mean, there's different layers, right? There's urgent things like, I have a deadline tomorrow and my job depends on it, or a client expects this by tomorrow, et cetera, et cetera. There's like kind of the very urgent, important things I think are fairly obvious to do. Then you got things that are like, okay, here's an email on like when I should answer someone. It's not really something that's urgent. I could just not answer and be a bit of an asshole, excuse my French, right? Or I could answer to try and please them. But then again, it gets down to like this level of like, as far as deferring or doing something now, do you have a general kind of thesis around, like how you decide what is worth delegating and what that impact will be on you, right? And as I'm talking specifically with emails here, I guess, but there's also like different kinds of activities that like you could defer forever, but then there's a sort of reputational issue or an empathetic issue where the other person gets offended or maybe you lose trust. And it gets into like this very kind of gray zone where you have to kind of set principles around, well, what are your limits, right? Are you willing to piss some people off? And sometimes I think it's in your best interest because everyone expects the world nowadays. And also like what's pushing the limits. I know it's very situational, but I think that's where it gets tough, is around things that are not exactly obviously urgent, but there's this gray zone around, how far you should delegate it or delete it or defer it altogether.
Yeah,
Does that make
great
sense?
points. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like if anything, what I try to do when I evaluate some things is I have a 2-minute rule. If it's something that takes me less than 2 minutes to do, I normally just get it out of the way. Otherwise, you also want to make sure that you're taking occasional time to do reflection. So you're looking at some of the things that you end up jumping to, because some of these 2-minute things might be things that you can actually do away with, right? So maybe every month or every quarter, you actually evaluate the way that you behave, evaluate the tasks that you do and things that you action upon. And think about, is it something that I need to continue to do, or is it something that I can put off?
Yeah, and that seems super important because if you don't have these principles or reflection periods where you kind of draw a line in the sand, then because when you're like in it day to day, like you're being pushed around, pulled around.
Mm.
And if you have clear boundaries, this is something you may talk about, is when you have actual time blocks. I will check my emails before I go to bed because that's the point of the day where my energy is low, my concentration is low. I can do sort of menial tasks. There's also an energy level question, right? Like, how is your willpower? One. And secondly, have you cut out time so that you, A, don't forget to do a certain batch of activities? And then, yeah, off you go. And maybe you do that Mondays and Fridays. Maybe you do it every day. But
Mm.
I think the systemization of your ideal work week with certain tiers of activities at certain times of the day, I think that's where it gets super interesting. And you have to, of course, constantly reassess. But I'm starting to do a lot of that, is blocking out time, especially the stuff that actually you could defer for a long time, but you know it's really important stuff that will eventually make things less urgent. So in other words, as you said, you can push off automating something because it might take like an hour to set it up, or 2 hours or 5 hours, but then you really got to make the assessment around, but if I bite the bullet, then it's going to save me Y amount of time. And that's when I think it's really interesting. It could even also be like a very value added blog post. It takes you a week to do and you have no idea how it's going to perform, right? But you've kind of got to take that risk assessment and see how much time it'll take off your plate, as far as maybe people who ask you questions all the time, right? Instead of you answering every time on a phone call, you're like, hey, read my blog post. Of course I do that. But anyone else who gives some form of advice, I'm sure can do that as well. So anyways, all things that I'm thinking about, and I'm curious to see which of those you may want to dive into now or later.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love you. I love that you're bringing it up because I think a lot of it is concepts around time blocking, batching. All of these are all frameworks that you can use to, like I mentioned, automate the process around evaluating some of these tasks itself. Because sure, you don't want to actually evaluate every single task that comes into your plate to decide, hey, should I do this now? Should this be order number 5 on my list? Should it be order number 20? That's going to take up a lot of your energy as well. So whatever you can automate in the process, you try to do it. Yeah. Great. So let's dive into some more specific techniques. Mm-hmm. So let's quickly talk about the Pomodoro technique. So the Pomodoro technique, most of you might have heard of it. It's not a very new framework. It's actually been around for quite a while. It was invented by Francesco Trillo back in the 1980s. And the key framework around it is it's a framework around using batches of time around 25 minutes in length. And you're putting short intervals or breaks in between. And why it's called Pomodoro, it comes from the Italian word of tomato. So it really starts because the traditional cooking timer is shaped like a tomato. So what you're doing is, the reason why you want to use this technique and how you use it is you use this more on a day-to-day basis. This really helps with generating focus. And the reason why it's so effective is because when you sit down and you have the Pomodoro timer going on, you know that you are working, right? It really eliminates all that extra distraction. It takes away from all these things that will challenge your self-control, like social media, or should I read a book, or should I do something else? So all these small distractions is mostly a challenge around willpower. So the way to use it, I'll quickly share my screen so you can see, is you start by defining what is the task that you want to have done. So you define the task, you set the timer for about 25 minutes, and then you get to work on the task. And what you do is, at the end of the 25 minutes, you can choose whether or not you want to end the task, or you can continue on if you would like to, right? So it's really up to you. Taking short breaks in between is also a good idea because it really just helps your mind, dive out a bit and make sure that you're stretching, make sure you're drinking water, things like this. So I commonly find it really helpful because I'm always looking at a screen, so my eyes get really tired. I take the short, 1 to 2 minutes just to do some eye exercises, get up, stretch, move around a bit. I have a standing desk, so what I'll do is I'll move the desk around, use a different position or posture, and get a drink as well. And what you do then is you continue on the timer after your break. And what you're doing is, your break is usually 3 to 5 minutes. If you have less than 4 check marks, so what you're doing is after the end of every timer, you're just marking it down on a piece of paper somewhere. You're marking a check mark. If you have less than 4 check marks, then you just go back and restart the process again. If you have 4 cycles, what you want to do is you want to take a longer break. So that's the 15 to 30 minute break. And then you reset your check mark to 0, and then you start from scratch again. So that's basically how you use the technique. And what you do is it's more of a day-to-day kind of thing. It's just to instill that sense of urgency. It really helps because sometimes we have certain tasks that don't quite have a fixed deadline. And those are usually the more dangerous things to do, right? Like write a blog post, create a video, read a book. Some of these things, there's no definite sense of urgency around it. So if you can create a sense of urgency for yourself, it really helps you instill some self-control in yourself and get things done. It also, the forced breaks also helps deal with burnout, because oftentimes we tend to get into a mode where we just work, run as much as one, and then we burn out and then we crash, and then that's the kind of thing that we want to avoid. I've seen myself go through that many, many times where I tend to be more of a night person, and at night sometimes I just get so caught up in doing things, and then I end up going to bed at like 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, and I know that if I do that, my next day is going to be a complete write-off. I'm just going to be sleeping in, I'm going to be tired the whole day, and then sure, I'll have another productive day sometime down the road. But if I can pace myself well, I'll actually be more productive on the long run as well. One thing to be very mindful and careful about is the concept around diminishing marginal returns. So what this concept means is you want to try to switch activities to complementary activities that allow you to rest and regenerate so that you regain attention and energy. Because what happens is there is a certain point where, no matter how much you try to cram information into your brain, let's say if you're studying, no matter how much you want to read, you will just start to lose focus. And it's just harder and harder for you to put more stuff into your brain. To give you an analogy, it's like if you have a food truck, and let's say if you have one person working at the food truck, your output might be 1 meal per minute, right? If you have 2 people working at the food truck, you can double your output. But if you have 50 people working in the same food truck, that's just not going to work out. So the idea is the more time or more effort you put into the same activity, over a gradual time, you'll start to see diminishing results. So you want to make sure that you're actually switching things around a bit so that you can gain some energy as well. Make sense? So that's it. When you switch, you want to make sure that you're switching things to things that are complementary, because when it comes to multitasking, the traditional mindset is that multitasking, people get more things done, but actually that is not accurate. Multitasking is actually more harmful than it is beneficial. When you are multitasking, you're actually not doing many things at the same time. You're actually switching from one thing to another thing, right? So if you're switching from things that are entirely opposite, what you will find with your brain is that it will actually take you a lot of time to get into the flow of things again, into the new tasks that you're working on. So if you want to try to switch tasks, you want to make sure that these tasks are complementary. They're using the same areas of your brain, so that you're not, having to put in a lot of energy and time just to kind of reorient yourself. So what you want to try to do with the Pomodoro technique is use it on a daily basis when you're working on projects. The next thing that I do is I talk about reflection. So reflection, you do it maybe once every month or once every quarter, depending on what you're trying to reflect on. There is this concept known as the Pareto principle, or in, I think, Peter Thiel's book, he talks about it's the power of law. Power of law or law power, whatever it is. But the idea is, usually in most cases, if you look at everything that you do in terms of the tasks that you have, the efforts that you have, the customers that you have for your business, for many things, 20% of your efforts give you 80% of results. And the inverse is also true. There are certain things that take up a lot of your time, but give you very marginal results. So take up maybe 80% of your time and only give you 20% of the results. So good examples of that include, where you have some of your best customers, if you're in a business situation, some of your best customers are giving you 80% of your revenue. And these are a few key customers, right? They might be, 1 or 2 big clients that give you a lot of revenue. And then some of your most difficult customers are the ones that take up a lot of your time, and they usually pay you the least amount as well. So that's one example with clients and customers. It happens with a lot of other things as well. So different activities that you do. So for example, let's say when it comes to regular planning and emailing. So emailing might take up a lot of your time, but there are certain emails where you write short, simple emails, but they are actually a lot more meaningful, and they actually give you bigger projects, actually help you move forward with some of your goals. So just really evaluate the things that you have on your plate and see what are things that are taking up a lot of your time. Are they giving you the results that you need, that you require, that you are hoping for, or are they just time sucks? And what you want to try to do is just make sure that things that are that 80-20, the ones that you spend a lot of time, that give you very minimal results, don't waste too much time on that. Another big example, I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head, is design. So for example, when I speak to entrepreneurs, because of what I do in my advisory role, a lot of entrepreneurs, when they start a business, one of the first things that they worry a lot about is they worry about their logo, they worry about their website. All of these kind of things take up a lot of time, but they are not usually that important. They're usually things that you can get by with a slightly uglier logo at the start. It's okay. In the long run, you want to improve it, but some of these things, like at the start, it's more important to get customers, to get revenue, to really validate if your idea is a good idea, right? So other things that take up a lot of time could be acquiring customers, but these are super important things. Getting feedback, iterating and focusing on your product or service. So making sure that you're really focusing on these things that actually give you better results. Julia sharing, for Mac users, there are a couple of options of apps that help you use the Pomodoro method, definitely. There's one called Be Focus, so Julia mentioned. The ones that I know, the one that I use is called Toggle, T-O-G-G-L. But there are a few other ones as well, for sure. Thanks for sharing that. So a quick exercise for you to do when you have the time. I'm not actually going to go through this exercise, but when you have the time, when you actually set a block to actually do some reflection, I want you to look at your personal 80%. So what are the things that suck up a lot of your time? So maybe it's things like email, maybe it's data entry, maybe it's analysis. If you run a business, maybe it might be sales, maybe marketing, it might be development. So what takes up a lot of your time? Are there specific projects? Are there specific customers? And you just want to make sure that these things that take up a lot of your time, do they actually give you the results that you're hoping for? And then another exercise you can do is you want to look at the things that are currently giving you the best results. And you want to try to do more of that. So what are your most profitable customers or services? Do you have certain activities that can give you the most breakthroughs? So for example, if you find that reading is usually something that gives you a lot of insightful things and is very meaningful for you, then maybe you want to try to read more, right? So really focus your energy around things that give you better returns. So like I mentioned, these are things that you do maybe on a monthly or quarterly basis, depending on what you're trying to evaluate, but make sure that you block off some time to actually do some reflection. So the next thing I want to talk about is distractions. So in this day and age, I think this is a little underrated, but what we often see is most of us tend to not accomplish what we're trying to do not because we struggle with it, not because of the challenges that come across us, but because we don't persist. So patience is a virtue that is lost in this day and age. And behind patience, what is really there is grit. You need to be able to persevere. You need to be able to have the passion and continue doing it. But the common enemy of perseverance and grit is right now we are often challenged with instant gratification, right? We are often distracted by small things that we just want to do because we scroll through Instagram and we feel that, oh, we just want to look at how many likes that we got. We want to see how many views we have. You want to get something and you want it now. So just making sure that you're very careful around some of these things because the internet, phone technology, all of these things have made a lot of these elements of instant gratification a lot more accessible to us. So we just have to control ourselves around that. When it comes to stats, many of us nowadays are pretty much addicted to our phone. There's actually a term behind that. It's called nomophobia. 66% of people are afraid of being without their phone. 67% of people check their phone even if there are no alerts. And if you think about emails, office employees check their emails up to 40 times per hour. So just making sure that you're catching yourself on some of these things. And it's not just your phones, right? These are daily distractions. They can be other things as well. Most of us just don't do a lot of the key goals that we set up for because of all these small and tiny distractions. So the first framework that I want to introduce is big rocks first. And I'll quickly just show you a video. I'm going to share my screen again.
Your name is?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. You have a work life?
I do.
Family life as well?
Mm-hmm.
Children?
Not yet.
Not yet. What's the nature of your work assignment?
I direct an international firm.
An international firm? Mm-hmm. So you really are interfacing with all kinds of people in the firm and outside the firm.
That's right.
You want a rich personal life and a rich family life. Do you ever feel like you get bogged down in the thick of thin things?
Yes.
Well, that might be analogous to all these little, small things that tend to fill our life. And that just little by little, they just accumulate. Now, your job, you can't go above this, is to get all those large rocks in the jar. Good luck. What's that one called?
Q2, planning, preparation.
Right. Planning, preparation, prevention, and empowerment. Mm-hmm. Okay, the next rock she's putting in there is called relationships and family. We didn't look at that third rock you put in there. That's employment, some key employment issue, and then you put major projects here. I can't get it above there.
I haven't worked it yet.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. That's called service, community, church. Do you ever feel like this?
Yes.
How many feel like this? By moving the little things around, you might squeeze in one more of those big major things. It's almost. Wow, that is good. You know, if it doesn't fit, force it. Here's something that's called urgent and important. It's a quadrant 1 thing that is blindsiding you, that it's your biggest client, that if you don't get back to that client now, you've given up your vacation.
No.
And you have no special block of time just for yourself. I'll tell you what you can do if you want to.
What's that?
You can take a whole different approach. You have a totally fresh bowl. You can work out of a different paradigm altogether.
Well, then I'd rather put these in the bottom and then pour the little pebbles on top.
Employment,
Big opportunity,
big opportunity.
important and urgent, block of time. Those young children keep looking at me. Glad my husband's not here. No, I'd dump these in there.
Okay?
All right. I think you all get the point there. And it is so true, because what we often find ourselves in is if we simply don't get to the biggest task, we will let all those small rocks take up all of our time. One of the things that I really struggled with in the last few months, especially during the work from home situation, is I find that I'm the type of person, once I get started on something, I'm usually quite productive. But the challenge is getting started. And the challenge as well is once you get started on something that you're not supposed to be doing, like browsing on social media or doing something else, then you also find yourself just sucked into that loop. I've been running some of these habit accountability groups, and someone was sharing where she would watch anime, watch certain dramas, and she would get so caught up in watching anime. And she would watch one episode and she would start watching, and before she knows it, she spent 5 hours watching different episodes. So if you don't do some of the big things, all those small things will fill up your life, like it or not. So just make sure that you start your day by actually tackling your biggest challenges. It's also a good idea to start your day tackling your biggest challenges because you usually have the most amount of energy at the start of the day. Any questions around that before we kind of move on, or any comments? Great, nothing else. A common question that I typically get for a lot of people as they're starting to think about how they plan for their day is, especially I find this with their creatives. They often talk about the flow state. They say like, oh, if I'm creating a piece of music, or if I'm writing an article, if I'm writing a book, then once I get into that flow state, it's really difficult for me to get out because I find like if I'm in it, then I'm really productive and I don't know when that flow state is ever going to come again. So the challenge there is people who have flow state, they don't typically work very well around structure and routine versus other people who tend to focus on structure. And I'll talk a bit about why I think actually structure is key to having flow state. So what I normally find is on a daily basis, we tend to lose energy. And why we lose that energy is not just the physical energy, but it's also because of decision making. So there's this thing known as decision fatigue. And decision fatigue happens because everything that we do on a day-to-day basis, we are making choices. We're making many, many choices around like what to eat, what to wear, whether or not I should reply to this email, should I actually do this for my business? All of these small decisions sap away at your energy. And the more structure you can put, like Paul was mentioning, if you have a calendar, if you do time blocking, if you set up processes to evaluate certain things, all of that will actually eliminate the need for you to make those decisions on an individual basis, and it helps alleviate some of that decision fatigue. So it gives you a bit more energy to your day. So what you want to try to do is create a routine, try to batch things together. So for example, for me, I actually only check my emails usually on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. I typically check them at the end of the day instead of at the start of the day. And then usually when I'm doing some of these activities, I don't check them in between. So I'm not like checking my email and doing some work and then checking email again. So I'm batching them so that I check all my emails and then I'm done with it and I don't look at it again, right? Other things to do is when you're working on different things as well, like I mentioned, you're trying to work on similar things together. So for example, I will have a certain day where Thursdays is my external meeting day. I will only take external meetings with people who are not within my organization on Thursdays. Other days are my working days. That's where I focus on projects, where I focus on doing different things. I have certain days where I focus on just creating content, writing. So the idea is to batch some of these things so that you don't end up having to struggle with that. And why batching is important is I find that if you are a proponent of flow state, you will find that when you start to batch, at the start, it is a bit challenging for you. You will find that it's really hard to get into that state of flow. But the more you get used to the schedule, the more your brain will start to recognize, oh, this is the time for me to be writing. And when you have that, then flow state will come a bit more naturally. I'm sorry, I'm just going to read some of the comments. Yes, so Ling is saying, yes, should try to focus our energy on big profitable tasks, not small tasks that bring value to our lives. Listening to big music makes me happy. Yeah, music is definitely something that you can use as well if it gives you energy. But yeah, like I was saying, making sure that you're doing some of these things in batches and then using structure to help you enter the flow state a bit more easily. So that's something I find really works well for me. To give a personal example, let's say with content, I've been doing a lot of writing lately. I'm actually working on a book right now. And I actually find that I'm not really struggling and I'm not getting that writer's block thing as much as I thought I would. And the way that I'm going about doing it is because I actually try to write on a consistent basis. I'm not just writing in a whole batch and then after that really struggling to come up with the next topic. So I've actually pace myself out. So every day I actually write a little bit, and I actually spend some time every day to review my previous content as well. So I'm writing as I go, and I find that it's actually flowing pretty well for me that way. So I know that everyone has a different style, but if you are really someone who finds that you work very well in flow state, I encourage you to try using some structure to help you enter the state a bit more easily. Other high-level tips, when you're working, just put your phone in a different room, turn off your alerts, your notifications, silent your phone. Stop ingesting news that you don't need, especially in this time and moment. I find like a lot of the news is really depressing. So if you can, try to only consume news when you really need it. Maybe put some time once a week to consume news, but otherwise don't try to consume it on a daily basis. Don't try to consume it on a daily basis unless your job really requires you to. So some other high-level bonuses that I just want to cover, just to give you some other things to think about. Being busy is also something that you just have to be very mindful about. A lot of us take pride in being busy, right? There is this big movement and kind of celebration lately around the hustle culture. And the hustle culture is not actually the healthiest culture, right? Being busy can actually be a symptom of much bigger problems. Being busy is actually, for example, it's actually a symptom of laziness. Why? Because when you are lazy, you're actually keeping yourself busy with a lot of small tasks. So some of the big tasks that you need to do, some of the big decisions require a lot of thought, require a lot of energy. And by actually really focusing on some of these things, it will give you a lot more result, a lot more profits if you're running a business. So being lazy can also just be a sign of, being busy can be a sign of laziness. Being busy could also be a sign of fearfulness. Maybe you are not afraid, you're afraid of making a certain decision. There are a lot of important decisions that need to be done that need you to actually just go through, have some courage, and actually, stick with it even though you don't know what the outcome is going to be. So don't use being busy as an excuse. It could also just be an indicator that you might be ineffective with the way that you're doing things, or just inefficient, right? So just making sure that you don't celebrate being busy for the sake of being busy. You're actually being productive, not just busy. Yeah, so I think one other last thing that I'll touch on is goal setting. So goal setting, I find few things that you want to think about when you are setting goals, not only for business, but also for personal goals in life. It could be fitness related goals. It could be goals that you have with, starting something, running a project, volunteering, things like that as well. But the idea is when you're setting goals, two things that you want to keep in mind. So one is goals are important because they help you measure if you're actually achieving the results that you're looking for. But the process is equally, if not more important, or the system behind achieving those goals. Because you don't just want to try to achieve the goals for the sake of achieving that. Because sometimes, even if you don't hit the goals, if you set the right process behind it, in the long run, you will win. So for example, Simon Sinek actually gave this really interesting talk where he was talking about measuring the right things. And one of the things that he was talking about is if you compare a sales team, for example, and you have sales team number one, and they're focused on hitting their monthly sales quota, and they're doing all kinds of things. They're doing like discounts, they're giving incentives to their customers, and they're really pushing to get the number by the end of the month. And some of these things are things that might not actually benefit the company in the long run. So like doing flash sales or discounts towards the end of the month. You commonly see that with a lot of, let's say, car dealerships, for example. Versus if you look at sales team number two, if they're focused on other activities that help them improve their sales techniques, like sales training, good mentorship and coaching, these kind of things might not give you immediate results, but in the long run actually help you much, much more. So just making sure that when you're setting up goals, you're actually setting up the right processes, not just focusing on measuring the outcome itself. Because if you just get too caught up in measurement, then you will fall into that spiral where you often just try to hit the goals for the sake of hitting the goals, instead of actually making sure that you're doing it the right way. So the challenge with goal setting often is many big goals in life are fairly intangible. We don't really know how exactly we're going to achieve it. It might seem too big at a time. So the high level is you want to try as they say, as the adage says, it's how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time. So you take things one step at a time, just break things down. And as you break things down, you want to make sure that all of your activities actually align with the core mission. So a great framework that I like is the OKR method. So it's OKR. O stands for objective. K is for key results. So KR is key results. And then you're thinking about actions as well. So what you're looking is when you set your goals. So let's say you have a fitness goal. And let's say your fitness goal might be, oh, I want to feel healthier. So that's your objective. So your key result might be something like, I want to run 5 kilometers a day, right? So that's a key result, something that's measurable. Usually the good OKRs, good objectives, are objectives that are aspirational, that they're challenging, they're a bit difficult to achieve. They're not usually measurable. Key results, that's where it becomes a bit more measurable. So that's where you're trying to set something that is tangible, something that you can see if you're actually accomplishing. And then action items is what falls into it. So what are the things that you do that help you achieve that key result that you're looking for? So if your key result, if your goal there is to, oh, I want to be able to be more healthy, that's the objective. My key result is I say I'll run 5 kilometers a day. Then maybe you might not be able to do that at the start, but one of the actions that you might do is I'm going to set, an hour a day to start running. And I'll just see how far I can go every hour, right, every day. And over time, you'll eventually hit that goal. So do that one step at a time. Like I mentioned, start to do batching, start to make sure you put it in your calendar so that you block it off and you actually get things done. And just start to break it into smaller goals. So that will help you a bit with accomplishing some of these bigger tasks. One thing I found probably has helped the most in the last few months is accountability. And if you struggle with this, just let me know. I'm happy to match you up with someone. I do have a few people in my list that are looking for accountability buddies. And the framework behind that is what you're trying to do is a good accountability buddy is someone who you don't quite know, so usually a stranger. If it's someone that you know, usually you tend to come up with excuses. But you share common goals or you're working on a common objective. So let's say, for example, back in 2014, I was starting my very first business and I was working with a good friend of mine, actually not a good, well, now he's a good friend. But when I first met him, he was actually a stranger. I actually met him at a party and he was also an entrepreneur. And we both were people who really like to push ourselves. So we ended up being accountability buddies and we would call each other at 7 a.m. every single morning, Monday to Friday. And we did that for actually 2 years in a row. No breaks. We did it on holidays as well. We only took the weekends off. So we would call each other at 7 a.m. in the morning. We would set goals for the day and we would follow up on what we did the previous day as well. And I found like that was probably one of my most productive periods. So test it out. If you find that you're really struggling with just getting things done, just having someone to hold you accountable really helps push you. And in the last 2 months, I've seen some really amazing results. I was doing this experiment where I was running habit accountability groups, where we would be groups of people around 5 to 8. And what these groups would do is they would meet once a week. They would set goals. People would talk about what they want to achieve. And over the last 2 months, we've had people who finished books. We had people who lost weight. We had people who learned new languages. We had people who started a new job, people who changed careers. So all these kind of things that you normally don't think are, they might seem quite easy, but they are things that you just keep putting off because you find that you're always busy. And you'll find you'll always be busy, right? Just by getting things done, having people to hold you accountable, you'll find that you're a lot more productive around just doing things. So some kind of high-level rules of engagements, if you're thinking about accountability buddies, is you want to at least touch base once a week. The key goal is to be consistent. You want to share roadblocks and challenges as well. Ask for help when you need it. And you can incentivize and make it fun by using punishments as well. So one concept that you can try to do is you can implement a punishment jar. So you can set up with your accountability buddy at the start. You can write down a list of punishments. You can put them in a jar. And every time you fail to hit a goal, you just draw from a punishment jar, and it can be random stuff like I'll shave off my eyebrows, I'll wear my clothing inside out for a whole day, whatever it is, right? Just make it fun. But these punishments need to be things that will actually hurt. They shouldn't be things that are like, oh, I'll donate to a cause that I'm passionate about. Like that's not a punishment. You might actually use that as an excuse to actually not get something done. So I think that is pretty much it. So I'm just going to kind of sum up some of the key things that we kind of covered. So as you look at your tasks, remember the focus funnel. What can you eliminate? What can you automate? What can you delegate? Take some time to reflect. What is your existing 20%? What are the things that don't take up a lot of time but actually give you a lot of results? And big rocks first. Make sure you're doing some of your biggest goals first. And use routine to try to get into the flow. And if you can, try to find an accountability buddy. If you need one, just let me know. I'll ask for you. I'll ask from you what you're working on, what your goals are, and I'll try to find someone who's a good match for you. Cool. Any comments, any questions before we wrap this up? Routine. Yeah, I can actually quickly show you my calendar and how I use it, just to give you a sense of how you could possibly do it. But again, everyone has a different style. And like Paul mentioned, you want to also be very mindful of your daily energy levels. Try to make sure that you're spending time where you have the most energy to tackle some of your biggest tasks, and times where you have the least energy to do some of the easier or more menial tasks. So like this is actually my calendar. I wake up at 5:30 in the morning, prepare milk for my baby, feed him, and then put him back to bed, drop him off at daycare. Like some of these things, I actually just put it in there so that I know what I have available to me. And then, you know, you can see, like I mentioned, Thursdays is my external day. I have certain days where I block off for internal work. You know, I have, you know, time for cooking as well, dinner time, time for reading, time for myself, for playing games, for reading comics. And I just make sure that I'm also sleeping consistently. I find consistency is key, especially around good sleep. It's not so much about how much sleep you get, but it's also about how well you sleep during the time that you sleep. So if I constantly go to sleep at the same time instead of like pushing stuff off, it's like, oh, 10:30, maybe I'll watch another video, or I'll, you know, scroll through social media a bit more. Those kind of things are actually really harmful, because the next day I just tend to find that I lose so much energy. So just making sure that you're consistent, because your body will actually get used to that. When you start to sleep at a regular time, then your body will actually go to sleep more quickly, and you will actually enter the restful and deep sleep a lot more quickly as well. I hope that kind of gives you some insight and helps a bit. How to improve mindfulness? Mindfulness is a bit more difficult. I think the first thing to really realize around mindfulness is just to make sure that you're not just doing things for the sake of doing things. That every time you're doing something, that you're just thinking like, hey, do I really need to be doing this? Why am I doing this? And then you're actually setting blocks of time to do reflection as well. So I usually meditate every day. And another thing that I do as well is I usually set off once a month to do reflection on what did I accomplish over the last month. And once a quarter, I spend every quarter doing some business reflection. So that's usually around strategic goals. Am I on track for what I hope to accomplish by the end of the year? Are there certain things that are giving me good results, certain experiments that are not working out? So just making sure that you block off time to actually do some of that reflection. I think that will help eventually build that muscle around mindfulness. But I don't think I have an easy answer for that. Okay. I'm just going to cover some other high-level stuff, and then, you know, feel free to type out more questions in the chat as well, or feel free to come off mute. But upcoming workshops, I think you all can see over here. So next week I have one on sales. So if you're thinking about starting a business, if you are in a business, or if you are in sales and you want to learn a bit more about sales, we'll be talking more about that next week. I have a guest speaker coming in on July 22nd to talk about life insurance. So he's actually an insurance agent. He's my personal insurance broker. I promise you, he's not going to sell to you. The idea is really just to help you really understand life insurance, what it's about, what the different types of packages are, what is like, what are different like term insurance, life insurance, you know, when should you get it, when is the right time for it. And then we'll be talking on August 5th about revenue and growth optimization. On August 12th, I have a dietitian coming in to talk about how dieting works, how to improve your relationship with food, how you can avoid some of that yo-yo dieting that some people get. Some new and interesting programs. I talked about this Startup Sales Academy that I'm working on. I'm also running a hackathon out in October. So if you're interested in starting something new, if you're looking for team members, that's something you can check out as well. So I'll share all of that in the follow-up email as well. And like I mentioned, the workshops are free, but if you felt like you got good value out of this, I do run off donations. So please donate what you think you feel it's worth. You can send an e-transfer or PayPal to chin@classy.nl, and 50% of that goes towards Universal Outreach Foundation, like I mentioned, and they provide educational opportunities for people in developing countries. So I think that's it. Here is my email, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And now it's just open time for Q&A, and we have some time up till about 7:30, so I'll hang around for a bit.
Great job, Chin.
Thanks, Paul.
That was awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Great. If no other questions, I can just skim through some other high-level stuff. Don't worry if you're missing it. I will upload this video on YouTube as well. Books I recommend. So Productivity Ninja, How to Be a Productivity Ninja by Graham Alcott. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Someone was mentioning tools. Sorry, that video, I'll actually skip through that. But watch that video if you want to. It's about procrastination. And the high-level concept is where we will struggle the most is for tasks that don't have definitive deadlines. So for example, if you say something like, oh, I want to lose weight, or I want to start a business. Some of these things we never end up doing because there's no definitive deadline. So it really helps where you are actually aware of that, and you actually start to deliberately set some deadlines for yourself. And actually also, he talks about creating a life calendar where you look at how many days you have left in your life to really help motivate you to actually get some things done. Tools that you can use, Trello for project management. So to-do lists, you can use this if you want. Asana is another one. Basecamp, another alternative. Toggle I mentioned for time tracking. Toggle also has a Google Chrome plugin, and you can actually use it for the Pomodoro timer as well. So you can actually set that up. It tracks the time. I can actually show you what my toggle looks like. There's a Pomodoro timer. You can see I have my toggle tracking, and I actually use it for all my reporting. So I track all of my tasks. I have different projects. I can see them week by week. I can see how productive I am on a daily basis. So it really helps. A whole list of other tools over here, so I'll share that link out with all of you as well. Pomodoro, you just use a simple timer. Some of the best tools don't need to be digital, right? They can just be physical tools as well. All right, that is pretty much it for the presentation today. I hope it's been insightful or helpful in some way for all of you. Thanks, Andrea. Otherwise, I'll hang around for a bit if anyone has more questions, but also feel free to put your LinkedIn in the chat if you'd like to connect with anyone else and build it out. Thanks, Paul. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks so much, guys. Ciao.
Thanks, Tiffany. Please send me an email and I will connect you with someone. And if you can, in that email, let me know what specific goals you're working on. Or if you have any preferences. I know some people prefer to be partnered up with another female. Some people prefer to be partnered up with entrepreneurs. So just let me know and I can try to find you a good match. All right, I think I'm going to wrap up. Looks like people are jumping off. Have a good night, everyone.